Hello, I'm Angelique Prince, Director of Prevention Programs and Services at WorkSafe BC. In this video, I'll walk you through how to determine if your workplace is remote or less accessible. You'll need to determine this as part of the written first aid assessment required for all BC workplaces as of November 1st, 2024. I'm speaking to BC employers throughout this video. However, workers, first aid training providers, first aid attendants, and Joint Health and Safety Committee members will also find this information helpful. As of November 1st, 2024, a workplace that takes more than 30 minutes for an ambulance to travel to under normal travel conditions is classified as a remote workplace. What are normal travel conditions? They're determined by the average time it takes to drive to or from the nearest ambulance station by a motor vehicle following the rules of the road and during the normal working hours of your workplace. Online mapping tools can be useful for locating the nearest ambulance station and determining driving times. Workplaces located on roads that can't be made accessible to a two-wheel drive BC Emergency Health Services ambulance must be considered remote. Workplaces that can't be reached by an ambulance traveling by land and workplaces with areas that ambulance attendants can't safely access are classified as less accessible as of November 1st, 2024. There are many factors that make a workplace less accessible, including hazardous areas with features like rough or steep terrain. For example, a cut block at a logging operation where a stretcher would need to be carried through logging slash would be less accessible. In fact, many forestry operations will be deemed both remote and less accessible. BC Emergency Health Services ambulance personnel are not permitted to enter hazardous areas and will not perform rescue activities. This means employers must have first aid attendants with an appropriate level of training and equipment to safely transport injured workers to an area accessible to BCEHS. Workplaces where workers may be working in hazardous areas should also be considered less accessible unless two conditions are met. 1. The workplace is not remote or otherwise less accessible. And 2. Alternative provisions are in place to safely rescue workers. What does safely rescue mean? It means moving the injured worker from the hazardous area to an area accessible to BCEHS. It also means appropriate and ongoing first aid is provided to the injured worker during rescue without putting the first aid attendant at unreasonable risk. For some remote workplaces, employers will be required to provide emergency transportation. Employers should also consider providing an alternative means to transport injured workers to medical treatment when it is reasonably known that BCEHS ambulance may be significantly delayed. When a workplace is more than 2 hours driving time away from the nearest hospital, or when air transport is the primary means of accessing the work location, then the employer should arrange for emergency air transport of seriously injured workers. In that case, you must make arrangements with an air transport service provider before the start of operations at that workplace. Confirm that the appropriate aircraft is reasonably available to respond to the workplace. Guidance on air transportation can be found in the first aid guidelines available on worksafebc.com/first aid. If you as the employer are required to provide emergency transportation, the vehicle must meet certain standards. The regulation sets out standards so both an injured worker on a stretcher and a first aid attendant can be transported safely. It ensures there's an effective means of communication between the first aid attendant and the operator of the vehicle, and looks to protect the injured worker from excessive jarring, the natural elements, and dust. Find more information at worksafebc.com/first aid.